Susan, I'm so excited to have you on The Elegant Warrior.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I feel like we have a lot of things in common, although our paths took some different turns and then came back together. So just to start off, tell the listeners a little bit about where you were educated and what you were educated to do, and then where you went from there.
Yes. Well, what we have in common is we both went to law school. I went to Harvard Law, but did not end up practicing law. After 3 years, I remember, dreading graduating, but I had all this loan debt, so I didn't know what I was going to do because I knew after spending some summers at law firms, I did not want to practice law. But the education gave me lots of tools, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I ended up going right into consulting. I was transferring classes at the business school, and I got what a job an MBA would normally get, which was to be a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group.
Great. Tell me, what was it about those summers that made you, because we have listeners, a lot of listeners who are lawyers or have been lawyers. And I'm wondering, well, first of all, when you went to law school, and the reason I'm asking these questions is because I think that we sometimes think we're trees and we're not allowed to move and we're not allowed to make those decisions.
Right.
And also to follow your own intuition and wisdom rather than sort of the path that people have laid for you. So when you went to law school, what kind of law did you think you were going to practice, or did you? And then what made you decide that that was not the thing?
Yeah. So I tried, my first summer, I split both summers actually, because you have 2 summers to do, and I split them so I worked for 4 different law firms because I kept trying, like maybe it's the law firm, and, I tried litigation, I tried labor and employment, I tried securities. And I had wonderful offers from law firms, upon graduation. I took the bar in New York in case I ever wanted, that was my plan. But, fundamentally what I found is I didn't, again, my choices were the large law firm, because I felt the loan debt that I had, like that was the only salary that was going to support it. And it just felt personally to me like a sweatshop. Like the 2-year associate was super unhappy, had no life. 4-year associate unhappy. 6-year, like starting to get happy, and the partners were happier, but it seemed like it was more that just because they had money. And for me, I just knew I didn't love it enough to sacrifice it felt like my whole life to do this. And so I'm like, I have to get out and do something else. There's also, I think initially there's a lot of research and writing, and I'm more extroverted person. So what appealed to me about consulting was the fact that you got client engagement work right away. I'd be working with clients, I'd be in front of them. And so that was appealing to me. But I also realized the inefficiency of the law firm model. And in fact, rather than write my 3rd-year paper on some legal case, I wrote it on the strategic management of law firms. And it was all about how law firms, and this is back in 1995, how law firms need to shift, how they need to break out of the pattern because a lot of what I do is about pattern recognition and pattern disruption. They need to break out of their model because it is not sustainable. And so I think a lot of law firms are now coming to grips with, particularly with AI, what is it going to look like in the future? But the whole model of I don't know. Anyway, I could go on, but you get the gist.
Well, I think you're right. And I think it's very true. One of the reasons that I was able to stay with the law for so long is that the kind of law that I went into did not pay anywhere near. And I too had the loans, which I'm still paying off so many years later. But when I first started, the firm I went to did not pay well at all. But the trade-off was I was immediately going into court, going into motion court, working with the witnesses, preparing them for depositions. And I loved that. I could not have, to the same point as you, I could not have been sitting behind a desk. That being said, there are a lot of people who enjoy the work and see the sort of the light at the end of the tunnel that you described. So again, it's, knowing yourself well enough to know. Now, did you enjoy the work at BCG?
Yeah, I did. I loved the variety of learning a new industry every time you got a new case, learning to apply more of the sort of, I had a business undergrad degree, so applying more of that, the business side of things as well. I think the learning opportunity there was tremendous. Yeah.
And tell the audience before we get going on all of the inner workings of this, what you do now.
Yes. So my career I didn't end up just disrupting then. I kept disrupting till I landed the thing that I was meant to do, which is leadership development. So I, from there, from BCG, after about 3 years, I went to an internal consulting position at NBC television.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Six Sigma. So I was a black belt in Six Sigma, and I did that for a bit, and then transitioned into director of marketing and business development. And from there, I did something I still wasn't really finding what was lighting me up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was going through the motions. It was okay. But particularly, what I learned at NBC is you can have the best process in the world, but if the culture doesn't support it, you're dead in the water. And that was definitely true for Six Sigma, which was at the time, NBC was owned by GE, and that was a manufacturing mentality and mindset and process. And, the company at the time wanted nothing to do with that. So, but it taught me a lot, and it taught me a lot about also leadership and how powerful good leaders were and how awful it was to work for bad leaders. And I also got a taste of that too in my BCG days. But I felt very sort of, I'm not motivated by any of this, and what am I going to do? And I had the opportunity to take a bit of a break because the time I was married, we moved to London, and I decided to pursue something I'd always wanted to do, which I got a master's in acting from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. And it was really that pivot. And people thought I was crazy. And to some degree, I thought I was crazy, but again, really intuition driven. I learned so much about building empathy, about dealing with that inner critic, that voice inside your head. These are all things that actors have to master to really develop their craft. And I kept thinking, God, there's got to be a way I could bring this back to business, because a lot of the leaders that I was with could use these thoughts. And as I got back into the consulting world, I decided I wanted to do something that looked at the human dynamics of leadership. And that's where I discovered leadership development, way back in, I think it was 2002. So I have been doing this a long, long time. The industry has gone through many changes and growth, tremendous growth, really. But once I kind of locked into that and worked for a boutique firm who did leadership development, and then started my own firm in 2006.
Wow. It's, you said people thought I was crazy. I'm sure people thought you were crazy when you graduated from Harvard Law and then decided not to be a lawyer. You passed the New York bar and decided not to be a lawyer. You moved to London and decided to get your master's in acting. What do you think it is inside of you that, I'm not going to say doesn't care, but that doesn't let people thinking you're crazy derail you from where your inner wisdom wants you to go?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, ultimately, I'm the one who has to get up every day and go into the job. And when over time it becomes everything, like, I think I have a low tolerance for suffering when it comes to career, feeling motivated related to my career. And maybe there's, as I look back, like, where did I develop that pattern? My dad was a dentist, and he hated being a dentist. And I think it bothered me all the time that he just felt like he had to do this to support the family, but he was miserable in it. And he did it all the way up to when he retired. And I thought, that's not going to be my life. Like, I will not, you have to give so much to your career. And I thought maybe even in a way there was something wrong with me. Like, why do I not like working? Which is silly because I'm so driven. Obviously I'm driven enough to like go through all the steps for Harvard Law. Right. But if I'm not connected to the mission or the meaning of the work, then I can't find, it's hard for me to keep generating that powerful drive. But once I'm locked into it, man, like, and so I really encourage, I feel so bad often, for, people in their 20s who are trying to figure it out, and society, even in college, you need to like decide, like, what is it going to be? And I'm like, it took me till I was 32 to figure this out. So not to be afraid to try, because it's only from trying that you get this information. School, university does not prepare you for what it's going to feel like to be in that job.
Yeah.
And so you might need to pivot, make these pivots. And I always encourage a younger generation is you can craft a story. That was one of the biggest things that people like, how are you going to explain you taking off, 2 years to go do this acting thing? And now it fits really well. I mean, that's the thing that often makes me unique. Like, wow, that's so cool that you did that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that this is a lot of the work that I do. If you believe it's congruent with what you do, and you communicate that with the energy of your belief, people will believe it as well.
Yes.
It's not,
Yes.
it's not that complicated. We think it's so complicated, like, wow, this doesn't make sense. If you think it makes sense and you're able to communicate that effectively, then everybody else will just fall in line. It's a lovely thing.
Yes. Yes.
There's a couple of things that you said that I want to double click on. One is that you mentioned that you sort of are good at recognizing patterns. And that leads me to want to talk about your book, The Leader's Playlist, Unleash the Power of Music and Neuroscience to Transform Your Leadership and Your Life. What is it about music? And did some of that come from the acting degree that you felt like you wanted to put the work in? And I know from having written books myself that you had to put into to write that book.
Yes, yes. Yes and yes. And I'll back up to say what I've discovered over time, my superpower is this idea of pattern recognition and then helping people disrupt patterns. I mean, this goes all the way back to studying for the LSAT, where I didn't do like one of the Kaplan courses. I took 8 practice tests and I could see the patterns of the questions that they were asking. And out of that, like I was able to only miss 2 questions and get a 98 percentile because that being able to see that. So fast forward, what I really help leaders do is to see that pattern or groove that they get stuck in. That is literally a groove in the brain. It's a 8-lane highway in the brain, and what that is and how to shift it. Now, music is one of those modalities that I use to help people do that. It's not the only one, because I know we're going to talk about the Enneagram. That's another one. Sure. But, and I have several, but the overarching umbrella is helping people see their patterns and how they influence what they pay attention to as leaders and what they're able to manifest as leaders, based on that belief.
Tell us more about how you use music to do that.
Yeah. So music is one of the fastest ways to rewire new neural pathways in the brain because of music's ability to light up all 4 regions of the brain. And I got very interested in this. So often one of the hardest things is to catch ourselves in a pattern. Or maybe we know we keep doing something, but we were just like, it's hardwired and it's hard to shift it. So I kept looking for what tools could we use that would make that process easier. And yes, because of my acting background, there's this piece around music and understanding how music works. But I did a lot of research around music's impact on the brain and how, if you think about music helps you remember things more quickly. When anything that you tie with music, it will sort of come to the forefront. And advertisers know this. This is why they have catchy jingles to go with their product. But you even think about how they're using music therapy in Alzheimer's patients who are unresponsive. Mm-hmm. And what they find is, they're sort of unresponsive and they put on their favorite music and they literally come alive. Those neural pathways relight up. And this can be seen on an MRI where we see all 4 regions of the brain in sync. And the effect can last even 20 minutes after the music ends. And so if music could do that, then the whole theory of my book is music can actually help you understand better what is sort of, I call it the old playlist that's running your leadership, and what new playlist do you need to get onto, and how can you use music to actually practice being in that energetic vibration that you need to be in, because music taps into our emotional state.
How can listeners do that? If they leave this conversation and they say, okay, I love music, or I used to love music and I haven't played it in a long time, what is something that they can do to sort of use music to change their state?
Yes. Well, I'm going to focus on, because we're at the beginning of the year. I want to create a new outcome. I have a resolution, or, I'm typically, when I work, we start with what's the old playlist you want to get rid of. That's a little bit, can be a little bit more involved. So let me just start with the new is to really get clear. What's the belief statement about yourself that has to be true in order for you to do X, Y, Z? And so when I say belief statement, they're usually I am statements. Yeah. So it could be that I am empowered, or I am safe, right? I want to not be angry anymore when this XYZ happens. So what is it that you need to feel in order for that to happen? I need to feel safe. So that's how we get to like, I am safe. And then what we want to use, or sometimes it's like, I'm not alone. That's another one that, like, particularly for entrepreneurs, where you feel like it's all on your shoulders. It's like, I'm not alone, or I have support. And so then you need to actually practice being in that state, that belief. Just having that belief is one thing, but how do you practice being in the resonance of that? So you want to look for music that best exemplifies that for you, right? And build an actual playlist of 10 songs or more that actually has you be in that state. And you want to start your day maybe with a song. You want to go out in nature using that. But the idea is to practice being in that state so that when you need to draw on it, you have access to it. You're building the 4-lane highway, or the 8-lane highway, the alternative to the old state. And I'll give an example from my own life, which I think will show the kind of old playlist and new playlist shift. Yeah. So one of the ways I discovered this was I just used it in my own life. Many years ago, I had an end to a relationship that really rocked me. There was some betrayal. Anyway, I won't go into the details of that, but what I will tell you is every time I thought of this relationship, I would continue to be stuck in a loop of resentment. And I knew as a coach, this wasn't serving me, but it was kind of like every time I thought about it, I would just get, that resentment building up. And so finally I knew for myself, like, I'm sick of doing, like, stuck in this loop, this pattern. Yeah. And so I decided that I needed something to shift the energy when it would happen. And I found Bruno Mars' song, 24 Karat Magic, did that to me every time. And so when I played that song, I would just be like, oh, whatever. Like, it would just make me happy. And I would play it hiking, and I decided, like, I'm going to find songs just like this. And I'm just like practice. And I called it I Am Empowered Playlist. And it was like all these songs that, like, nope, not going to go there. I'm going to shift it. And then what I realized is sort of this old playlist is I Am Treated Unfairly. And I even created an anchor song for that, which was that song, Jar of Hearts by Christina Perri.
Yeah,
right. And so it's like, do I want to keep staying in, like, do I want to keep hearing that song? No, I am tired of that song.
Right.
So that's how I started to shift. And the more I did that, it just opened this place where I had the power to build that new neural pathway of, like, I'm empowered. I'm going to make this happen. Right.
So good.
And so when I did that, I started testing it out with clients as well, who were trying to make big shifts. Yeah. And that worked. And that's how then I started researching music's impact on them. Why does this work? Like, how is this possible? Right. And that's how I wrote the book.
Amazing. And it's a phenomenal, phenomenal book. I have it on my Kindle and I was reading it again. I had bought it when it came out because we're in a group together and I had heard you on another podcast from that group. And it's really, I love the neuroscience and it's sort of unexpected how you talk about the neuroscience and the music, but once you dive in, it makes perfect sense. It's intriguing. And the other thing that you do that's intriguing is the Enneagram. And it's funny, you and I spoke yesterday and I was telling you that we have not talked about that, I don't think, on the podcast. And even though we're at 350 episodes, it's kind of shocking to me because I've done the Enneagram. I know what I am. And so what is it? First, can you tell the listeners what it is?
Yeah.
And then second, what drew you to the Enneagram?
Yes. It's a incredibly rich, deep tool. It's an archetypal model of the way I use it, 9 leadership styles. And in that, as human beings, we think we can see 360 degrees like a chameleon, but we can't. We have a central vision and a peripheral vision. And where we point our focus of attention, that's what we see. And we've become very good at seeing that. It's our motivation to see that. But there's something behind our head we can't see, and that's our blind spot. And so the model of the Enneagram is really a systems model because it shows you what your superpower is, where you tend to look based on upbringing, and that blind spot that you can't see. And in the model, someone else is looking that direction. So if I'm arguing it's blue and you're saying, no, it's green, we start to see why that's happening. But the model really shows you that your path of growth is to integrate these blind spots and to start to see what you've been kind of more narrowly focused on and starting to widen the aperture. So it's very specific on your path of growth. And in leadership development, I've worked with a lot of the different tools that sometimes it gets lumped in, but it's very deep and very different. It's different because it's looking at motivation, not behavior. It's the why behind what you do, not what you do. Yeah. And also it's linking how we link together. It's building deep empathy because you realize not only are people different, well, of course, right? A lot of those models show that, but it's actually showing you why you need that person to be that your best friend in terms of growth. And why that person that triggers you is actually your best friend in terms of growth. And so I find it incredibly powerful to work with teams in this way, where we really break down conflict and people really understand what they're each there to contribute to the team, but also where they personally need to grow. And I think the more I can shed the light where people need to grow, that's where the work is.
Absolutely. Now, are you typically, if people are listening here, Susan, and they're like, well, I want to work with Susan. I want to know more about how to use a new playlist and how to use the Enneagram to see my blind spots and see new perspectives and grow. Do you typically work with individuals or organizations or both?
Well, I typically work with organizations. However, we've developed some of the materials that we've used in organizations for individuals. So if you're interested in really understanding both getting assessed on your Enneagram type, but also how to apply that to be a more effective leader or more effective person in general, we have a program called Enneagram Applied that does that. So that you get a high accuracy Enneagram assessment. This is one thing about the Enneagram I love and not love at the same time is no one owns the Enneagram. It's an open source model. Right. And so there are lots of different assessments out there, but the problem is some of these like sort of cheapy freebie ones are not accurate. I cannot tell you how many times people have been mistyped. And so I literally get like angry with these things because I'm like, it doesn't help you if you don't know, you don't have an accurate typing. So you don't know this path of growth. Like now you just added confusion to the system. Yeah, so you really want a dialed in, and we use that, a dialed in assessment to really understand it because it's harder to assess someone's motivation than it is just their behavior. Behavior, if you think of like an iceberg, is above the waterline. We can see that. And so some other types of assessment may be easy to do that. The Enneagram is, because it's more complex and deeper and richer, it's also harder to assess. So you really have to get the right, but once you get that, it unlocks so much growth. What I'm curious to know what type you are.
I am a 3.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
What
Great.
are
Great.
you?
So 3 is, just for listeners, is can be a couple different names for it. The productive performer could be one. The competitive achiever could be another.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is about efficiency and getting stuff done, right?
Too much so efficiency. I had a Judge Rosemary Aquilina on the other day, and she was talking about impatience. And I definitely am impatient. And I think, it's funny, and I don't want to dive too deep into my Enneagram, but it's interesting because the lawyer thing fed that, because I
Yes.
build in 6-minute increments. So everything had to be very efficient. So
Yes.
it's interesting.
Yes.
What's yours, Susan?
Mine is 7, enthusiastic visionary.
Very
So that's sort of someone really looking ahead, typically a multidisciplinary person. So you can see my background has brought that together, finds connections between different aspects that others may go narrow. I go broad and deep, and I bring those pieces together.
What drew you to the Enneagram? Was that after you went to got your acting degree?
Yeah, it was. It was maybe about 6 years into doing leadership development, because I noticed the other types of tools I was working with, like Myers-Briggs and DISC and some of the others, they were helpful in people understanding themselves, but they weren't getting to the breakthrough of what needs to change, or I call the so what factor. Like, so what? I'm an ISTP. What is that?
Right.
And so what? And so this really got to the so what factor. And that's why I say, but it also created the linkages between other people. And I think it's a tool that actually brings ultimately harmony and empathy for people, which I believe this world needs more than ever.
100%. 100%. And actually, doesn't it have some basis in faith, like a faith-based?
Yes, there are. It's also been used from a spiritual component. And I think it was also the spiritual side that really drew me. I was interested in how is the spiritual, which is more about similar to like the I am, like, what do I believe about myself? And so, some would say this model dates back centuries. And so there are some roots, but we don't, in a business context, we don't go there. We just call it your leadership style, and because it can be used in that context as well.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And your integration of music and neuroscience and your brilliance, I mean, it sounds like you are a typical 7, like the multidisciplinary, but it's wonderful. And for the listeners, we're going to put a link to Susan's. She has a podcast. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Her website, we'll put a link to that in the show notes, so that if you're in an organization and you want to explore any of this, and the Enneagram's a great thing because it does make you, I think people love any sort of quiz or, test that they can take to sort of understand themselves better. And for me personally, the Enneagram has been the most spot on when I do those things.
Yeah.
So we'll put a link to your website so that people can explore that in any way they want to.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, is there anything I forgot to ask or you wish I had asked with respect to you and your work?
Oh, no. Well, just one thing. If you want to get a taste of it, it's not a full Enneagram assessment, but it'll start to give you the direction. And I think it might pique your interest. We do have a free quiz called Your Leadership Superpower and Roadblocks. And so if you go to, there's my personal brand site, which is susandrumm.com. You'll see that free quiz. It'll give you some information. But here's the other piece that's pretty cool. We're going to send you also what chapter in the book your results most relate to, because in the book, I go through 9 different examples of leaders and their old playlist and their new playlist with the actual music that they used. And so we'll send you that, and you'll kind of be able to like link these things together. And that's how we bring both kind of the music piece and your leadership superpowers together.
Amazing. We will put a link to that in the show notes as well. Susan, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your book and all of the work that you have done with me and the listeners. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Great to see you.